Well, thank you very much. I remember in my early years as a young person that I would observe with the rest of the community boats leaving towards the Barrenlands, an age-old tradition of migration to the Barrenlands to harvest and then go back into the tree line to live among the caribou. And I thought at that time, I was still young, that one day I would go. And but at that time, back in the 60s, we have federal day school, and then you can go to Fort Smith. So I spent about 3 years in Fort Smith. And one year I came back, and I was waiting for the boats to leave, and it didn't happen. The boats didn't leave that year, and then the following year, nothing. Following year, nothing. Following year, nothing. For almost 16 years, boats didn't leave the community. But what replaced it was twin otters. The twin otter would land. The best hunters would get in, and they'll leave to the Barrenlands. They'll come back with the meat. There'll be a freezer in a community. They'll put it in a freezer, and then they'll distribute it to the community once in a while. And that carried on for a very long time. But then, but the boats still weren't going. And then back in the 1980s, 1985, around that time, the community was very well established by then. A lot of people had moved into the community, and very little people lived full-time out in the bush. And then we got the idea that maybe we should start a friendship center in a community because we need to adapt to this modern way of living. And that's what the organization's about. So we went on our lobbying, and the person that helped us very much was the late Tom Eagle. He really put his heart in it. And we followed him to Ottawa, and we saw how he did his work, lobbying, knocking on the doors, and giving the message that here's another group from Northwest Territories who are urbanized, and we need to adapt into this urban environment. And eventually we got the funding, we established a board, and then we thought, well, we should start our work. So we invited some elders, a whole bunch of them. Actually, if you invite one, the whole community comes. And so they were in there for about 2 or 3 days. And we're telling them about life. We didn't know much about life, but we told them that we're living in an urban environment. We want to retain our language. We want to retain our way of life, culture. What should we do in an urban environment? And what do you mean? What do you do? You need to go back to the land. If you organize a trip to the land, you young people go by boat, we'll go by plane. And CBC, one of the ladies that we hired at the time was Joyce Rabiska, the late Joyce Rabiska, who helped organize and put the money together and put this plan together. And when the boats were ready to leave, the elders were already there. They're ready to leave. A few went by boat, so I jumped into the first boat, the late Nick Black. Everybody seems to be late. And I was afraid to carry that freighter canoe. It looks really heavy. I mean, if it's dry, it's fine, but after being on the water for a week, it gets waterlogged and it's very, very heavy. And one of there's a couple of guys where the thing is, if you carry a boat, you're a boat carrier. You have to take it all the way. And I was glad I wasn't carrying a boat because it looked pretty heavy. I mean, but we helped put it up on their shoulders, and that was heavy enough as it was. But somewhere about a little over halfway, about a week into the trip, the younger guy in front he kind of like, I think I had enough or something like that. Like he just didn't want to carry the boat anymore. And so I thought it's just too heavy. I can't do it. I'll stand way over there and see what happens. So I kind of watched from a distance, and this old Nick, he didn't see anybody coming up to pick the boat, so he was already in his 70s, you know. And then he said, "Oh, I guess I'll have to do it," right? And he's frail, and so he lifted up on me, you know. So we went over there, we lifted up on his shoulders, and he put it on his shoulder, and you know, he can feel the weight. And he made a few steps, you know, maybe about 20, 30 feet. And then he's, you know, I think I had enough too. So we lifted off his shoulder and put it down, and well, who's going to do it? Nobody's stepping up, so I thought, well, I might as well give it a shot. There's nobody else there. So I'll do it. Okay, good. You do it. We'll lift it on their shoulder. So I get underneath, and they lift the boat, and it landed on my shoulder. I think I shrunk about a foot because you can't really see in the front because of the freighter canoe. It's like this, and you can see the trail, but not much beyond that. So then Nick is walking in front so I can at least see his feet. And I don't think I went further than he did. I said, well, I think I had enough too, you know. But he was in front coaching and says, you know, if you feel that it's too heavy and you want to give up, you just take another step. And then you take another one, you take another one, and another one, and then you start floating. Well, I'll do that, but I'll rest first. You know, so they unloaded because, you know, you're ready to block out, you're ready to black out, you know, everything's going dark. And I think it was for safety reasons they took the boat off me. But after a good rest, you know, like you're just flat out on the ground, just try to cool off. And I don't think I walked any distance in this room. And finally, I got my second wind and put it on my shoulder. Then I started walking, and I can feel the weight. And then I thought, well, I'll just take one more step, and it just gets heavier and heavier. And all of a sudden, you just don't feel it anymore. You know, it's just like you're floating. And so he said, well, that's what happens. You start to float, and then you can go all the way. You know? And so over time, I quit putting the boat down. I'll just go all the way because that's the way it used to be. And but the thing was that it was a chance to go. I really wanted to go, and when the time came that the planes had already landed where we were headed to, Mesa Lake or Gutsungkati, But along the way, I discovered that there's lots of graves of individuals, of babies, of old people, some with crosses, some with cribs, some don't have any before Christianity, place names, and trails, the name of trails, and the genealogy that comes with it, was all this information was just coming. And then we made the last portage to Mesa Lake, which is just goes up straight like that for all the way up to the end of the room. That is just straight like that. You almost have to crawl up with this boat and without stopping. And so that the boat doesn't slip off because it's so steep that they put a rope on the end of it, and there's about 4 other young guys who are pulling it up, and we're just standing straight, walking up like this, and they're just dragging us up, and all we had to do was just put our foot down on the next one, and eventually we got over the toughest portage. It's ts'ehde. And that place name is so old that if I started telling you that story, it would take hours and maybe days. But that's how place names are really packed. And over time, I discovered that these place names is really a story of your own beginnings, of how your relationship with the land, the animals, and the environment was forged. And one thing I discovered was that when we were approaching the ones that came by boat, there was just a tent city, and the boats were approaching, and then the volley of shots were going off. And in that volley, this emotion just came pouring, like a sensation I never felt in my life, that this is what it's about. This is what it's like to be a Chicho. This is us, And when we approached the land with the people there, everybody was smiling. And the closer you got, all the people on the shore were laughing, they're smiling, they're happy. And that's what it was about. For a brief moment of time, everybody was happy. Okay? There's no problems that would put you down at that moment. And that, I think, is what I thought that everybody should feel. Everybody should have that feeling, because it's like a gateway into your language, into your culture, and into your way of life. And ever since that day, I've been going out every summer, taking a whole bunch of people, leading them, because I know they're going to get that feeling. We're going to get that spirit back, the feeling that this is who we are. Masicho.